This is Lesson 4, ready for teaching on October 22. It's titled The Old Testament Hope, and I'm Percy Harrold. Friday, October 21. Modern science teaches that all matter is composed of atoms, themselves made up of two smaller particles, quarks and leptons, which are believed to be the building blocks of all physical reality. If then at the core of the physical world is quarks and leptons, couldn't the God who not only created and sustains that world also just reconfigure the quarks and leptons when the time comes to resurrect us? Mocking the resurrection, atheist Bertrand Russell asked what happens to those whom cannibals ate, because their bodies are now part of the cannibals, and so who gets what in the resurrection? But suppose the Lord simply grabs quarks and leptons, the ultimate building blocks of existence, from wherever, and, based on the information that he possesses about each one of us, reconstructs us from those quarks and leptons on up. He doesn't need our original ones, any will do, or in fact, he could just speak new quarks and leptons into existence and go from there. However he does it, the God who created the universe can recreate us, which he promises to do at the resurrection of the dead. We read in the Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary, Volume 4, page 1143, a quote from Ellen White, which reads, "The life-giver will call up his purchased possession in the first resurrection, and until that triumphant hour, when the last trump shall sound and the vast armies shall come forth to eternal victory, every sleeping saint will be kept in safety and will be guarded as a precious jewel, who is known to God by name, by the power of the Saviour that dwelt in them while living, and because they were partakers of the divine nature, they are brought forth from the dead." End of quote. And that brings us to our two discussion questions this week. 1. There are an estimated 2 trillion galaxies out there, each made of billions and billions of stars. And some of these stars have planets orbiting them, just as the planets in our solar system orbit the sun. Now, think about the incredible power of God, who not only created all these stars, but who also sustains them and knows them by name, as we read in Psalm 147, verse 4. Though this amazing reality does not prove that this same God can or will raise the dead, how does it reveal to us this same awesome power that he does have, and why, certainly, something like the resurrection would not be beyond his power? And question 2, Hebrews chapter 11 highlights the faithfulness and expectations of many of the heroes of faith of ancient times. How can this chapter enrich our understanding of the hope that the characters in the Old Testament had, even before the resurrection of Jesus? And now it's time for Inside Story with Sibylla. Thank you, Sibylla.
Sharing Living Water by David Maldonado. Antonio Maldonado didn't know much English, so he motioned to an interpreter at the reception at the US White House in Washington. Antonio, a member of a mining delegation visiting from Peru, saw that the guests were being served fine whiskey, but he simply wanted a glass of pure water to raise for the toast with President Lyndon B. Johnson. Speaking through the interpreter, he politely voiced his desire to a waiter. It was a difficult request to make. Everyone seemed to be holding glasses of whiskey, and Antonio didn't want to make a scene. He didn't want to embarrass fellow delegates as they wrapped up the US trade talks. But as a young man, he had made a commitment never to drink after seeing the ruin that alcohol had brought to homes in Peru. 2 years earlier, in 1963, he had given his heart to Jesus after hearing Voice of Prophecy radio broadcasts. While Antonio spoke softly with the White House waiter, a pair of eyes watched him. Those eyes followed the waiter as he brought Antonio a glass of water. As Antonio accepted the water, he heard a voice speak. "Waiter, wait," the voice said. "What did the gentleman ask of you?" "This guest wanted us to change his whiskey glass for one with pure water, Mr. President," the waiter replied. Lyndon Johnson extended an arm and handed his own glass of whisky to the waiter. "Please bring me a glass of water as well," he said. After the toast, the president approached Antonio and, almost whispering, asked, "Why don't you drink like the others?" With the interpreter's help, Antonio replied with a large smile, "When I was young, I promised myself that I would never drink, and many years later I renewed that promise with God," he said. "So far, everything has worked well." The president extended a hand. "Congratulations for being such a magnificent example," he said. "I too am a man of faith. God bless you." A firm handshake ended the conversation. As Antonio mingled at the reception, he felt curious stares. His habit of abstaining from alcohol, strengthened by his faith, had resulted in an unexpected encounter with one of the most powerful people on earth. His heart rejoiced that he had been able to represent God at the White House. Today, Antonio seeks to represent God every day in Concepcion, Peru, where he lives with his wife, Emna. He is 99 and she is 90, a living witness to their conviction that, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God, as quoted in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31.
This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. And you can listen and watch at the same time on YouTube. Remember, God is always faithful.